Hey there, everybody. This is Johnny here, and I'm by me lonesome because Sai has not seen this movie and probably won't for the foreseeable future. But I wanted to get my thoughts out there, so here we go. Let's have an episode.
What's our seat number?
Bonus.
Hello, and welcome to What's Our Seat. Yep, that's what it is, because there's only one of us here today, so it's only half there.
Across the devil's plain, he did not die in vain, no!
I'm Johnny Gross, I'm a filmmaker, and one half of the What's Our Seat number duo. Today I'm going to talk about The Flash, because yesterday I went and had a cheeky afternoon off work, and I went by myself to the cinema to see The Flash.
Now get this, he reads comic books. Comic books. Barry Allen is the Flash.
Was it worth it? Well, we're about to find out.
So you're saying you could travel back in time?
But Bruce, I can fix things. I could save people. I could save my mom. I could save your parents.
You could also destroy everything.
This is mad trippy. Dude, this is catastrophic.
This world must die.
I'm not gonna lose her again. It's not Clark.
My name is Kara. I will help you.
Interesting group. Want some help?
Wait, he's Batman?
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts.
Oh, this rips!
So a little bit of background about this. I'm not a huge Flash fan. I don't remember reading any dedicated Flash comics. He always sort of turned up in Superman comics that I used to read, or Justice League, or whatever it was. So I was never a real fan of the character as a sort of a standalone thing. So obviously I came here for Michael Keaton. And, well, does that disappoint, or is it everything I thought it was going to be? A little bit of both, kind of what I expected from the trailers, but kind of disappointing. The reason is because Batman is a dark character, and this is the problem with any team up that seems to happen with the Justice League, is that anytime you bring Batman in, he's either got to conform to the tone of the rest of these characters, which is usually a little bit lighter, or they have to conform to the darker tone of Batman. So you get something like Batman v Superman, which goes from the slightly lighter tone of Man of Steel. Man of Steel was still pretty dark, but it gets even darker by Batman and Superman. Or you get Justice League, where Batman has to be sort of lighthearted and jokey because everything else in the movie is like that. Especially with the inclusion of Ezra Miller's Flash, who is very much originally a Zack Snyder creation, but I think Joss Whedon kind of leaned into the sort of jokey, geeky side of this character. And in this case, you've got a very specific Batman, which is Tim Burton's Batman. And that version of Batman is quite dark, very comic booky, kind of Grand Guignol a little bit, very gothic, but very dark. And then you've got Ezra Miller's Flash and everything that's going on in this movie, which is still trying to be kind of Marvel-esque. And it just is at odds. I would have liked to have, and I know a lot of people have said this, but I would have liked to have had a standalone Batman movie with Michael Keaton. If they could have gotten it together in the mid-2000s, for example, that would have been great. But there were times in this one I thought that that poor old 70-something Michael Keaton was going to keel over and die from the heat in that suit and the intensity of what was going on the screen. So I would have preferred maybe a standalone movie. If they were going to make it now, it would probably be Old Man Batman. It would probably be Batman Beyond, or something to that tone. So let's get right into it. So first of all, the first thing I noticed is that the opening sequence it's a lot of fun. It's very exciting, but there's a lot of janky CGI, which kind of took me out of it at the beginning. And then, of course, there's Flash's funny run. It just reminds me of a certain scene in Mickey Blue Eyes.
Just stop. Just stop, otherwise I can't go on. Just run normally.
I am running normally.
Oh, all right. I'm sorry. I thought I guess I haven't seen you run before, and I thought you were doing a funny run.
Funny run? That's my run.
The opening sequence is kind of, there's a sort of cross-cutting between Batman going to take down a criminal. Flash is sent to deal with a hospital disaster. Cut a long story short, a whole bunch of babies start falling out the window in the maternity wing. And it would be horrifying for me. I'm a parent of two. But then you've got this kind of like John Williams-esque score from composer Benjamin Wolfish, who is kind of channeling the sort of mischievous side of John Williams. So everything's very light-hearted, even though there's something really intense going on. It's like 12 or so babies falling out of a massive high-rise window to their deaths. And then Ezra Miller catches one in a microwave, which is horrifying in and of itself. So while I was kind of enjoying myself during the opening sequence, I wasn't quite sure about it. So then he links up with Batman. So I just want to mention from the off here, spoilers abound. So if you have not seen the movie, don't listen to this just yet. Listen to it after you've seen the movie.
Spoilers.
He links up with Batman, and then there's a cameo from a very prominent Justice League member. Once again, the same thing that happened in Shazam. Gal Gadot turns up as if she had nothing else to do for a 30-second cameo, and the Hans Zimmer theme kicks in with the and it's all very yay, it's Wonder Woman. And you know, that maybe the first 2 or 3 times that happened, I would have been like, wow. But in this case, I was just like, oh, it's Wonder Woman again. Okay, fine. And then there's a sort of semi-humorous scene where both Batman and the perp that he's caught are caught up in the lasso of truth. It reminded me a lot of the Justice League. That is the tone that we're going with here. It's very colorful, it's very vibrant, but very sort of jokey. The complaint that I had with The Dark Knight Rises, the finale of The Dark Knight Rises specifically, was that it takes place in broad daylight, and Batman and his costume should not be seen in broad daylight. He should be coming out of the shadows. And I think as soon as you show all of that, you kind of highlight the ridiculousness of a man in a batsuit, especially since they're trying to keep everything very dark and broody for all of these movies. But Batman here is in broad daylight quite a lot. You got Ben Affleck's Batman right at the beginning, and then later on you got Keaton's Batman standing around in Siberia in broad daylight. So it sort of highlights the weaknesses in the batsuit, whereas he's supposed to be a figure of fear. So I kind of wish that filmmakers would stop doing that and sort of relegate him to the shadows. Then we have a kind of a flashback where you see Barry Allen's mother getting killed off screen. It's never revealed who actually does it, and his father gets accused because he went out to get a can of tomatoes. And when he comes back, he finds her with the knife in her, and he's cradling her and whatever, and he's the only one there, aside from Barry, who was upstairs. So Barry decides that he figures out how to go back in time by running really, really fast. Hello, Superman the movie reference.
It is forbidden for you to interfere with human history.
And so he starts running really fast, and he finds himself in this kind of dimension of... It's a big ball of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. It's called the Speed Force, apparently. And as you know, I haven't really read very many Flash comics. It's probably covered in the Flashpoint run, but I have not read that yet. I will do. So it's called the Flash Force. No, the Speed Force. Sorry. And so he's here in this big round. It looks like kind of one of those auditoriums that like in Bram Stoker's Dracula, where you've got Anthony Hopkins in a sort of university auditorium, and it's round, and there's all of these seats all around it, and he's dissecting a cadaver or something like that. It might be Bram Stoker's Dracula that I'm thinking of, or it might be Dracula Dead and Loving It. I do get those two confused quite a lot. So that's basically what this Speed Force thing looks like, right? So you've got where the stadium seating is all of these different moments in time, and he can then choose to go into whichever one of them he wants. And he decides that he's going to change the fact that his dad went out to get a can of tomatoes by going to the supermarket when his mother was there and putting a can of tomatoes in just embrace your Britishness, man. Putting a can of tomatoes into the shopping cart, and therefore she wouldn't have to send her husband out. Her husband would be there, and whoever went in to kill her would have been stopped. So there you go, that's his plan. And then when he's going back to the present to see if it worked, he gets pushed out of the Speed Force into one of the timelines, and he finds himself in a moment in time where he's a teenager. His other self there is a teenager, and his mum's still alive, and everything's great and everything's hunky dory. And then there's this whole thing where he has to kind of recreate the moment where he got his powers. So he has to take Teen Flash to a forensics lab and sort of recreate the moment where lightning struck a shelf full of chemicals, and he gets doused in the chemicals and hit by the lightning, and therefore becomes Flash. So it's kind of a quasi origin story there as well, because we haven't had that yet, and it's kind of clever that they did that, because I didn't know anything about how Flash got his powers. But there's one rub here, and that is that Ezra Miller is playing two versions of Flash, and his younger version is so fucking annoying. The laugh, whatever it is so annoying that I wanted to reach into the cinema screen and slap both of them, because Flash, present day Flash, 29-year-old Flash or whatever it is annoying enough. So now we have two of them. And the issue is that instead of using some kind of in-camera technique like a split screen or over the shoulders, or sort of trying to find ways to place the camera so that you don't see the stand-in's face or whatever, so they've used deepfake or facial replacement or whatever it is. I don't think it's deepfake. I think they've basically just replaced his face with CGI, and that he's had dots all over his face, and it's been motion tracked, and they've got him to make all sorts of faces. It's a slightly older technique than what they would have used for the opening of Dial of Destiny, which in the trailers looks kind of good, but by all accounts is kind of off-putting, because in motion it doesn't look good, and you can see that Harrison Ford is a 75, 80-year-old man, and that he moves in a certain way, which is exactly the same issue that I had with all of the cast of The Irishman. So the issue is that they've used, every time they've wanted to put both Ezra Millers in the shot together. So the stand-in has a facial replacement. And the problem is the CGI looks very, very wonky, first of all. So you can always tell in every single shot which one has been replaced, which one is the stand-in. But also they've decided to replace the face. They've used the stand-in for the Ezra Miller that's talking, or is like in the foreground, in the front of the shot, in the forefront, who's talking and doing something, rather than the one that's slightly out of focus in the background, which I find to be very, very strange, because it draws more attention to it. They still haven't got the lip curling right. They still haven't got the sort of mouth movement right. And his pores have been smoothed out and everything. There's a major complaint about the CGI in general throughout this entire movie, but that's one that I find to be very egregious, and it's something that really bothered me throughout, because you're supposed to be empathizing with both of these versions of Barry Allen, and it looks like the facial replacement of Princess Leia at the end of Rogue One. It just doesn't work. And it looks like they've kind of gone back in time. Teen Barry Allen is very annoying. There's this whole exchange about Back to the Future. And it's a one-joke gag where Eric Stoltz in this timeline played Marty McFly. And Eric Stoltz, for anybody that doesn't know, was originally cast as Marty McFly, and then about 8 weeks into production, they found that he wasn't leaning into the comedy of it enough. So they decided to replace him with Michael J. Fox, who was the first choice in the first place. So there's a whole discussion about that, and then they start talking about all these other actors that were replaced in this reality with other actors in different movies. So it would have been fun if it would have been handled better, but it just kind of feels a little bit forced. And then while they're talking about this, the shorthead Ezra Miller, as we'll call him, was searching for Batman, because this is a reality where there are no metahumans. Superman doesn't exist, and Wonder Woman doesn't exist, and Cyborg doesn't exist. Nobody's there. So where is the Batman of this reality? Does a Batman exist? And they found out that there is one, and it's Michael Keaton. So they go to Wayne Manor, which is the original Wayne Manor. It's the original sets. It's the original. At the very least, they've built it, or they've done a matte painting of the outer facade of it, and it looks exactly like it does in the Burton movies, and they've sort of tried to recreate that. So they're really ramming the point home that this is the same Batman as appears in the Tim Burton movies, and he's got long hair and he's a whole hobo, and it's a whole thing. And he sits there and explains in this big expository scene to the two Flashes about what the multiverse is while he's making spaghetti. It's kind of a less successful version of the whole sandwich making scene in Kill Bill Volume 2. He's explaining to the two Flashes all about the multiverse. It's all about spaghetti and the intersecting timelines and blah, blah, blah. My question is, how does Michael Keaton's Batman know anything about the multiverse? Because there has been nothing overtly sci-fi in the previous two movies, or particularly supernatural, aside from Catwoman having 9 lives and living after being thrown out of a window. But it's not overt. It's not like the terraforming machine in Man of Steel and all of that stuff, the Codex, Kelex, all that stuff, all that really, really overtly sci-fi stuff that goes on in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman and Justice League. It's sort of rooted in reality, but it's kind of gothic. So I don't understand how Michael Keaton's Batman would know anything about the multiverse, but it's exposition and we need it, so let's chuck it in there. I'm not a fan of Michael Keaton's new cowl. It's kind of flat and rounded at the nose. There's no underpart like sort of covering the septum. It just doesn't look very good. It kind of looks a little bit more like Ben Affleck's cowl. And I know I might be nitpicking on this, but if you're going to fan service, there are going to be people who want to see exactly the same thing that they saw back in 1989, 1992. So yeah, I'm not a fan of the cowl. And to that end, the younger Flash makes himself a makeshift Flash suit out of an old bat suit, and he cuts off the bat ears, and oh my god, it looks ridiculous. I just couldn't get behind that. Throughout the entire finale, all I'm doing is looking at that. I'm going, oh my god, he looks so stupid. But that's by the by. That's got nothing to do with anything. So there's this whole extended thing where they're sort of hanging out in the Batcave, and Michael Keaton's Batman is just there and doesn't seem to mind. And then he decides that he's gonna put on the suit again and be Batman again after 30 odd years of not being Batman. He's like, yeah, I'm Batman. And then, that whole thing that was in the trailer that was very sort of prominent, where he says,
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts.
And it's fan service, but it's just kind of forced. The whole thing's kind of forced. They don't really flesh out anything to do with where Michael Keaton's Batman has been all this time. Alfred's clearly died in the interim because he was very old, even in 1989. And they don't really sort of flesh it out. So even though he's there to kind of wave and go, hello, it's me, I'm back again. And that's all fine and good, but there's nothing behind it. There's no weight behind it. There's no emotional character building of any kind. He's just sort of there as a deus ex machina to help Ezra Miller to sort of get to the next stage. And in this case, it's because for whatever reason the lightning passed through older Flash into young Flash, so young Flash got the powers and old Flash got his powers taken away, so now they have to do this sort of quasi Frankenstein thing where Ezra Miller's being strapped into this thing with chemicals all around him, and they're kind of harnessing the lightning that just so happens to be striking. It just so happens to be a dark and stormy night, that particular night where they decide to do it. So you've got mad scientist Bruce Wayne standing there with a console and a lever that's been designed exactly for that purpose of creating life. It's alive! It's alive! There were these official stills that came out of Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne kind of grimacing and this like lips pulled back in a grimace and his teeth gnashing together almost as if he's kind of enjoying it, and he pulls that lever and the lightning comes down, and obviously it works, and old Flash gets his powers back. I want to mention also that they go looking for Superman. That's the whole sequence in Siberia, that they go looking for Superman, and they don't find Superman. They actually find Kara Zor-El, who is Supergirl in this continuity. She's great. I don't have any problems, except for the fact that she's not emotionally fleshed out in any way, shape, or form, just like Michael Keaton's Batman. There's nothing behind it. All of the emotion is channeled into Ezra Miller's Flash because his stakes are, I have to save my mother. Well, actually, he's already saved his mother, so there are no stakes there. But General Zod's coming in to invade Earth because he's followed the two pods with Kara and Kal-El to Earth, and now he wants to terraform Earth to resurrect Krypton, which is exactly what it was doing in Man of Steel. It takes place during the timeline of the timeline of Man of Steel, but there's no Superman in this continuity, so they have to get Supergirl to face off against Zod. And so Supergirl's being held in this Siberian lab. She's been zapped of her powers. I'm not even sure why. Maybe they're just experimenting on her or whatever, and Flash comes in to save her with Batman. They take her back to Wayne Manor, and then she decides when she sees the devastation that Zod is leveling on this city, so she decides to intervene, and then she finds out from Zod that Kal-El never got to Earth. They intercepted his pod and they killed him, and that is her one emotional moment, and she screams and her laser eyes go off, and so she's got a motive to want to battle Zod. So with all of this setup, there's really nothing behind it. You've got Michael Shannon, who doesn't really get to do very much, and I read that Shannon said that he was very disappointed in what he had to do in Flash. His return was not what he thought it would be, because the script just doesn't give him anything to do. He's just he's just coming to terraform Earth, and that's about it. So let's talk about Michael Keaton's Batman in these massive battles. So there's a battle at the end of the movie in the desert, and they have to do it a few times. They have to, Ezra Miller decides that he's, oh no, Supergirl's dead. We have to go back in time again, and we have to redo it, and all that kind of stuff. In the process, Michael Keaton's Batman flies in a few times with his Batwing, and the Danny Elfman music swells up, and it's great and everything, and all of the fanboys are going to go woo, but it doesn't mean anything. And then Michael Keaton's Batman just dies, and that's the end of that. And basically, Flash leaves the battle to try and go back in time, because he realizes that in this continuity, Earth is going to get destroyed anyway, and he just sort of leaves Supergirl to die over and over again, and that's it. That's the end of that sort of that timeline in the multiverse. It's done. Just sort of leaves it. I don't know if I'm misremembering this. I saw it yesterday and I was really paying attention. I got a phone call in the middle of it, so I did look down at my phone once or twice to kind of cancel the call. But I'm not sure that I missed anything. I think that they just sort of left them all to die, basically. And then you've got this moment where Teen Flash wants to keep going back in time over and over and over again. We can do it. We can get it right. We can get it right. We can get it right. And you find out that there's this sort of thing made of spikes that kicked Barry Allen out of the Speed Force at the beginning of the movie. And you find out that was Teen Flash, who's just kind of been ruined by constantly going back in time, and he keeps getting stabbed with things and whatever. So then he's basically battling himself in a CGI fest of burly brawl Smiths from The Matrix Reloaded. It's as if the filmmakers went back in time and grabbed the team that worked on The Matrix Reloaded and all of those kind of, the Superman Returns, all of those CGI heavy movies that couldn't quite create humans from CGI at that point, and used legacy equipment and legacy software to create everything that I'm about to talk about. There's a sort of a multiversal thing where you see all of the various different multiverses, I guess. There's Nicolas Cage battling a giant spider, which in and of itself is a story. It's the unmade Superman Lives movie that was supposed to be directed by Tim Burton, that John Peters, the producer, had insisted needed to have a giant spider in it. And he got his way because the giant spider ended up in Wild Wild West. Not quite sure what was going on there. But anyway, we get a CGI rendering, a really bad CGI rendering of Nicolas Cage. Then we get a really bad CGI rendering of Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater as Superman and Supergirl. Really, really doesn't hold up. And various other characters as well. We've got Adam West. And I just feel that the realization of the multiverse is much more solid and interesting visually in Multiverse of Madness, in Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, than it is here. And I think in general Marvel got that right, more so than DC. I also think that in general the multiverse is not a concept that has been properly fleshed out by DC. In the same way that the Snyderverse was kind of rushed. All of these characters that were going to appear in the Justice League appeared for 25 seconds in Batman v Superman on security camera footage. They were not even introduced in their own solo movies, which Marvel took the time to do. And I've complained about this in the past. But yeah, it's not a concept that's been really fleshed out. It doesn't have much precedent, only to just sort of, hey, let's do the Flashpoint storyline. To kind of wrap up, I think it's fun. Ezra Miller's performance is okay, if annoying at times. And there's some good stuff in there, but it's a 2.5, 3-star movie. I think it's quite messy. And also talking about the CGI, and Andy Muschietti, who's the director of It chapters 1 and 2, had actually talked about this in the press about the CGI and how the CGI had been trippy on purpose. But I don't think the problem is that it's trippy. I think the problem is that it's just not very well done. You would be able to tell if it was on purpose, and it doesn't look like it was on purpose, because all of the CGI stuntmen are very janky, to use Sai's word. So I don't buy it for a second. I think they maybe ran out of money or ran out of time, or they were trying to do too much, which is exactly what happened with The Mummy Returns, by the way. A lot of that stuff reminded me of those sort of early 2000s effects. I think that in general it's got the tone of a early 2000s superhero movie, pre-Batman Begins. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a lot of fun, I think, if you just sort of let go. And I want to say that this is a movie that exists in another timeline of the multiverse. Not that it takes place in the multiverse, which it does, but almost that the movie itself exists in a multiverse in another timeline. It's in its own bubble. It doesn't connect to anything else particularly. And if you view it like that, like a side movie with a greatest hits kind of vibe, you'll enjoy it. But it is a big fucking gloopy mess. I did think that the resolution was good. I thought that Barry kind of exonerating his dad was very satisfying, and there was an emotional core to the movie which I did connect to and I did quite enjoy. But the main draw of the movie, which was Michael Keaton's Batman, was, to my mind, kind of pointless. Nice to see him and everything, but quite frankly, unless it's a standalone Batman movie where they're directly addressing the fact that he's been away for a long time, and he's coming back to sort of for one last ride kind of thing, Logan style, then that would have been great. But I think in this particular case, they just sort of shoehorned him in there. I want to say that Christopher Nolan did something wildly different with Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. And The Dark Knight Rises is the sort of closing of that, whether you like it or not. Even though I don't like the daylight sequences and Batman and sort of being his costume being bathed in broad daylight, I do appreciate a lot of The Dark Knight Rises. There are issues with it, But there are issues with all three of those movies, and I would just quite happily sit there and enjoy rather than pick them apart. But anyway, I digress. Nolan tried to do something different. Zack Snyder tried to do something different. And I feel like the rest of these movies, like Wonder Woman 84, Aquaman, Flash, they're just trying to be light and fluffy in a sort of MCU kind of way. There's nothing interesting or radical about them. They're extremely mainstream. They're not doing anything that's kind of surprising. For example, if you look at Guardians of the Galaxy, that was radical. There's so much stuff in all three of those movies that are like, whoa. Okay, he's trying to do something different. Casino Royale was exactly that for James Bond. Ghostbusters Afterlife had elements of that. It wasn't set in New York. It was very much wrapped in a coming-of-age story. It could have been Licorice Pizza, but it had ghosts and ghost busting in it. While it did kind of jump the terror dog towards the end of that movie with the final sequence, which I've actually come to enjoy in subsequent viewings, it still tried to do something very, very different, and I want to see something that's going to surprise me in that respect. This was a bog standard superhero movie, and it didn't do anything particularly unique or fun or interesting with it beyond sort of being it. Sort of it is what it is. If you watch the trailer, you've got it. Okay, it is that. I didn't have anything riding on it. I wasn't expecting anything from Michael Keaton coming back as Batman. I wasn't expecting the second coming of Christ or anything like that. I, quite frankly, can go back and watch the two Tim Burton movies and enjoy the shit out of them, and nothing's changed. I'm still divorcing this movie from those movies. I'm not thinking, when I'm watching Michael Keaton in Batman 89, I'm not thinking, oh, he's going to end up with long grey hair and a beard and a hobo spouting shit about the multiverse in 2023. So anyway, that's basically it. That's all I wanted to say. It is a fun movie. It is a fun afternoon out in my case, but a night out probably in your case. I'm a freelancer, so I get to do that. If you like the Snyderverse and you like the Justice League, then you'll like this. The CGI was very distracting and constant all the way through. And normally, Sai said to me yesterday, if you're gonna watch a movie and it's really, really great and there's some wonky CGI in there, it shouldn't matter. And I said, well, it's all throughout, and the movie isn't on that level where it can transcend that. And I said to him also, like, if you look at Avengers Endgame, there's some janky CGI, there's a few janky shots here and there, but the rest of it is so damn good that it didn't really bother me at all. And that's not the case here. And look, I did enjoy the jokiness of this movie. There's one great gag at the end. And again, spoilers here. If you haven't seen it, go put your fingers in your ears and go, ah la 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 la. But when Barry Allen gets back to the present, he encounters Bruce Wayne driving up in the same sort of Porsche that he was in at the beginning of the movie when it was Ben Affleck. And because he's sort of proverbially stepped on a butterfly in Peking or something like that, and completely ruined the timeline. So now it's not Ben Affleck anymore. It was George Clooney, and that cracked me the fuck up. I was in the cinema with a bunch of prepubescent kids. Obviously school is out already, and like 3 other guys that looked exactly like me, like dads who just wanted some me time and skived off work for an afternoon. And I went at the top of my voice, and that was a well-kept secret. I didn't know about that. I've got a surprise for all of you. I've just been ranting in this episode for the past 35 minutes, but look who's just walked in the door.
Oh, me. Hello.
Yes. Hello.
It's me.
Anyway, he's seen some of it now, so we're going to talk about it. So here we go. A little bit of a bonus on top of the bonus.
Bonus.
Drop page. Warbucks continue.
The previous episode, I don't know if you heard it, dear listener, but I just did an episode. I called it a bonus because I was by me lonesome. My partner in pod wasn't
willing to shell out the cash for that piece of shite.
Wasn't willing to shell out the cash. So I did an episode for The Flash, and I released it today. And I think I may have bummed out one of our listeners, Wei Lam Kwa. I apologize to that.
Can we get some sort of very sad string music?
Okay.
Just to illustrate the death of your friendship.
Well, I didn't.
Why do you think you've upset him? I don't understand.
Well, I don't think I upset him necessarily, but
what are we talking about?
What he said was that it was a bit difficult to sit and listen to a movie that he really enjoyed being trashed by me for 35 minutes. But I didn't. To be fair to myself, I didn't set out to trash it. I actually quite enjoyed myself during. But then,
isn't it sort of like a fridge logic sort of thing where when
definitely
you walk away from it, you kind of go, huh?
Yeah, it was definitely
when you
that.
get to the fridge.
Yeah, and so it all just came pouring out just like that,
So,
right down to Batman, the nose of Batman's cowl.
I read this really interesting thing about the sort of Henry Cavill Snyderverse movies.
Right.
And they said, first of all, the article begins with, The Flash is a kind of poor send-off for Henry Cavill's, kick-off in that sort of universe. And
well, Henry Cavill he wasn't even in it, and I was kind of hoping he would be.
So there were plans for that.
Yeah, there were certain people
they shot it as well, didn't they?
Maybe there were certain people that I wasn't expecting who did turn up. So there were certain things that were very well kept secrets that actually surprised me while I was watching it. So
what I read was, and I really thought this was a very good way of summarizing this whole series. Each subsequent movie after Man of Steel was a response or a reactionary movie to the movie that came before it. So Batman v Superman was a reaction to Man of Steel. That there was all this devastation in that final fight, and it wasn't sort of dealt with, and it just seemed to be fine after that, and that's not really how Superman operates, and that he killed Zod, and that he doesn't have the sort of thing and so that movie tried to address that and to correct that and give him like a more, I guess, heroic Jesus-y persona, right? And then the Justice League, the Justice League,
yeah,
the Justice League,
yeah,
is a response to that being too dark, right? So they have like the lighter tone and the weirdo color palette, and then the Snyder Cut is a response to the complaints about that movie.
Yeah, so then they drained all the color out of that.
Everything. And it's almost like the sort of climax of The Flash.
Yeah.
Which I've seen a bit of, and also, I read about it.
How have you done that? It's just been released in cinemas, Si.
An illegal bootleg.
Hold on, there's somebody knocking at the door. I think it's the FBI.
Don't we have to put our bums in the air? Wasn't that what we did last time? So
the finale, by the way, the more I think about it, it's just a big jumble. It's a big soupy mess of CGI.
The thing there that illustrates this point is the fact that it's the climax with Zod and everything is taking place in a desert kind of area.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like there wasn't a better compromise for how they're going to, make good on what was wrong with Man of Steel. It's either destroying everything in the city and having a massive fight where everything goes down, or desert with nothing in it. And it's like they just didn't get what they were supposed to do with these characters, and they didn't understand them, and so they were just reacting to the crowds.
Right. Spoilers, by the way. The thing that really bothered me about that finale, I don't know if you've seen, is that basically they kind of the two Barrys kind of come to the conclusion that this world is going to die anyway in every timeline, so we'll just leave them to just die.
Yeah.
And they just bugger off back to the Speed Force. And it's just very kind of weak. It's just that he's kind of gotten to the realization that maybe changing the past isn't all it's cracked up to be.
You mean the thing that everybody has been fucking saying the entire movie?
Exactly. And the stakes basically are that Zod is coming to wreak havoc like he did in Man of Steel, and there's no Superman to stop him. But at the same time, that is kind of a false set of stakes, set of steak knives. Because as I said, they just basically leave that world to die and just go back and sort of rejig the timeline. And the real stakes of the movie are Barry's mum getting killed. And he kind of sorts that out right at the beginning of the movie anyway.
Yeah.
So that's done, sorted, put a nice bow on that. And then at the end of the movie, he kind of reverts that. So
I really
what's
felt
the
like
point?
the Flash
What's
TV
the Flash
series,
point?
the CW series, did
Yes.
a really good job in that first season of dealing with the Henry Allen, in jail, and the whole his mum's death and him trying to solve that. Like, that's a back sort of plot that he's dealing with the whole time.
Right.
They really get across some good emotion there. I do think that Ezra Miller does have some very good emotional beats at the beginning of the movie. I've also read that at the end as well.
Yeah. But as I said in my review, I did connect with that, and I did enjoy that aspect of it, and I really felt for the character. It's
But
just a
that's the
shame that
thing
he
is
was so
that
insufferable for the rest of the movie.
These movies,
yeah,
at the end of the day,
yeah,
are about flawed people who
Right.
have special abilities.
right,
That's what makes them different. But what makes them special is that they are still people. When you look at a good Spider-Man story, the best Spider-Man stories involve Peter Parker and Spider-Man's worlds colliding and how they affect each other.
right.
Those are the best ones. And the Tom Holland movies get that. And that's why they're so successful.
Yes.
And it's understanding what the underlying point is of one of these characters. Whether it's Batman's guilt driving everything that he does. And is he going to grow from it? Is he gonna maybe turn a corner? Not really, even when he looks like he is, right?
Right.
He's actually...
Especially, like, I was reading Hush.
Yeah.
That is that's very much a sort of it encapsulates exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Because in Hush, for those of you who haven't read it or seen the DC animated movie, the story is based around the relationship between Bruce and Selena Kyle, aka Catwoman, and he almost runs away with her and gives up his superhero life to be with her.
But he can't.
But he can't do that. And I thought that was very it's a very cool way to present the relationship between Batman and Catwoman that I hadn't seen before, and it was that's a great book.
What's really funny about it is that not funny, sorry. What's really, really strong about that particular story,
Right.
is okay. So we're seeing this very human, in love part of Bruce, which we do see, occasionally, but it's sort of contrasted with this really stark. Look into his psyche.
Yeah.
As, the whole scene with the Joker where he's like, I don't know if you're there yet, but like, you've
read
finished
the whole
it.
thing,
So he's like beating the Joker to death because he walks into a scene where it looks like the Joker has killed his friend Thomas Elliot.
Right.
And, he just goes crazy on him. So it's always fun when a Batman story looks at the reflection of Batman in his villains and what they bring out in him. And that whole thing about, and I always say this when talking about Batman stories, and you can even hear it in the Batman episodes that we did about the movies, where it's about, they're always saying in Arkham that they're saving a cell for him.
Right.
Because he belongs there.
Right.
And that is, to me, why a good Batman story is so compelling. Because
the killing joke.
The killing joke is exactly
that.
Exactly.
The fact is that no matter how hard he tries, he will never be a family man. He will never get it together with somebody and
there is no happy ending to his story.
Exactly. And all that stuff is very, very deep. Which, going back to the Flash, the treatment of Michael Keaton's Batman, who is tortured in the Burton movies, and weird and socially awkward. For some inexplicable reason,
they made him have like a really long beard and hair.
Yeah,
and
he's a sort of like rich man hobo for some reason.
But then doesn't he show up with like a he's all suddenly looking like
clean shaven? Yeah. The thing is that whole Gandalf look for a washed up superhero is incredibly cliched. I've seen it so many times.
Yes, but it's not a very good look. Like in this particular case, it doesn't look very convincing either.
No,
it's such a shame because they have the best reference possible for what an older Bruce Wayne, who is sort of not Batman anymore and is old, needs to look like.
Right.
Batman Beyond.
Yeah.
He is clean shaven. He is old. He has a walking stick, and he is a grumpy ass fuck, right? And it's like that I could believe of, sort of a version of Michael Keaton's Batman. But on that topic,
No, but that's what I'm saying. That's what I said.
I know you said if they would have in the early 2000s, made like a Michael Keaton return,
yes,
it would have been a lot better.
Yeah,
but they couldn't have done that because they were in the middle of the Nolan trilogy.
But that's what I said about and the general treatment of Michael Keaton in this movie is that he's literally just there so that they can wheel him out and have the audience go.
Right.
You know, it's like Kramer just stepped in the room.
Yeah.
Like, hey, look, it's Michael Keaton. Hey, look, it's Michael Keaton. He's Batman.
Pogo, who recently jumped through a door and scared his wife doing that.
Very nice. Very nice.
Mm.
So just in general, the treatment of that character was not particularly successful.
Do you know what I was thinking when he sort of was clean shaven and talking to them as Bruce Wayne?
Yeah.
Right, in the Batcave. I was thinking to myself, do you know what I would have liked? I would have just liked it if they would have made a sort of Tim Burton-esque return for Michael Keaton. Right? They didn't need to bring on Tim Burton. They could have just tried to, in that, same vein. And just as a one-off, like Joker is a one-off. Right? I'd have watched that because I do think that Michael Keaton is still really, really engaging.
Yeah.
As I just think that, he knew what his role was, and it's what you've said. It's the audience baiting. It's, you want to get nuts. Let's get nuts.
Yeah.
And I just hate it. I can't stand it. And I can't stand what I sent you about Christopher Reeve about, the sequelitis thing.
Yeah.
Which, during the indie episode we can go into and we can sort of... Mm-hmm. Play that clip maybe or some of it, but it's like such a true statement that all they're doing is constantly trying to line the pockets and the coffers, as he says, or I think he says that, and reaching their hands into the till, and it's like, where's the care for these characters? Because when you see a movie that has been made with care and consideration and character plotting, and even if it's not very good with the CGI, you don't feel like it was done just for the money.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm sure there are other movies that I can't really pick off the top of my head right now, but there are other movies that have wonky CGI that are just great movies that it just doesn't bother me. This was kind of slapping me around the face literally every 2-3 minutes with something that looked awful. And I know that there's been issues in the special effects world, like since COVID, a lot of effects houses have closed, and there's a lot of effects artists who are overworked and whatnot. What the solution to that probably would have been in this case would be to try and bring down the number of effect shots that are in the movie, but also not try and bring so many people back from the dead. Yeah. And that stuff just I meant what I said, and I stand by it. It really does look like they went back to the early 2000s and sort of use the same tech that they were using at the time for the Burly Brawl and Matrix Reloaded.
Again, like
it just looks really, really bad.
The Flash, right?
Yeah.
His Speed Force in the TV show is admittedly not as good as you would get like in a proper like Marvel movie or something, but or I mean one of the better ones like Endgame, right? But it still works really well, and their CGI and their special effects are they're wonky in some episodes. You can tell that they put more effort in this episode, because there's like a big gorilla or whatever. But it's like, why is it that you can't just pare it down just a little bit? Because you don't need to be Doctor Strange. There is already a Doctor Strange. We don't need all this wonky stretching
that's
whatnot.
Obviously what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
I thought seeing some of the trailers and seeing some of the hype around it, that I thought that maybe they'd pulled it off, but it doesn't quite get there.
No,
it doesn't quite get there. Anyway, so
must move on. Thank you for joining us for this little extra bit on the end of the bonus.
Bonus.
And we thank you, and don't forget to tip your waiter a tris, or
you could just like and subscribe.
Yeah, that one.
Leave a review, leave a rating. How
Let
about
us know that you liked it and that you were there for it, because your silence is insulting, quite frankly. And I'd like to have a word with you afterwards, you and me, mano a mano, or a womano, or any other thing.
Cyrano,
or Cyrano de Bergerac.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Bergerac in Jersey. John Nettles. That's how it went. Okay.
Yes. You know what we should do?
Yes.
That's how we're playing us out.
Oh,
Thank you very much and enjoy the. Yep. You see his eyes as well. His little eyes, and he's all like, oh, I'm a Clint Eastwood, but my name is John Nettles, and there's been a murder in Midsummer.
Okay.
Bye. What's our seat number?
Bonus.